Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alison Stewart and I'm the host of Cut the Crop. And today we've got Richard Chynoweth from FAR, who's going to be talking to us about winter weed control in white clover seed crops. Morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm good. Yes, a lovely winter's day.
Well, it is a bit miserable out there. Now, before we talk about the weed control side of things, what's happening with the crop at the moment? Most of the crops are already in and up.
Yeah, so white clover will have been sown back in the autumn. So all the crops will be sown. It's been a difficult season to establish white clover. So pretty much everything that eats clover has been out there this year. So we've had grass grub issues, we've had slug issues, and then we had the dry autumn, which made establishment difficult. So lots of people had to irrigate white clover to get it to establish. Then from there, we've had the slug issue has been a big one this season, especially on headlands.
So is that going to substantially influence establishment, or do you think that it'll just come back as the conditions get better?
So generally, as long as you've got enough plants, and for white clover that can be as few as, if you can stand on one as you walk across paddock, you've probably got enough.
Yeah.
So they can be really, really thin and still produce good seed crops. So I think most people have managed to establish enough plants. Ideally, you want quite a few more than that. So I think most crops, I haven't heard of any complete failures yet, but there is a wee bit of clover root weevil still kicking around as well, which is causing a wee bit of a headache at this time of the year. So the adults are finally stopping feeding with the cold winter conditions, but now their larvae are starting to chew on some roots and nodules underground. So I think overall most crops will be okay, and there's other crops that are looking fantastic, almost looking too good. So we've got everything from plants struggling with 2 leaves through to plants that might have 6 or 8 leaves doing really well.
And from the point of view of, acreage of planting, it's just a normal year or up or down on normal?
From what I gather, because the certification areas won't come in for another couple of months, that it looks like it's about a normal season. So somewhere around 6,000 hectares would be our estimate for the current season, which is up on, say, 3 to 5 years ago, but well down on the long-term average, which is more like 9 to 10,000 hectares.
Oh. So, I mean, sort of like they've already had, insects and grubs sort of like compromising the crop. Weeds are going to be the next sort of issue. So what are the main problems that the growers should be looking out for? So
the middle of winter is our key timing for trying to control Vulpia hairgrass. So curb is our key go-to for that. So for most people, they should have been thinking about that for the last month and hopefully started to apply curb, which we really want the coldest, wettest part of winter. So it's a good idea to have that on hand and just be able to use it whenever that arrives. It's different every year. And then we run into the south thistle issue. So the Sonchus species of south thistles, of which there's 2 species that cause problems, predominantly a spiny south thistle and what we just call annual south thistle. So the spiny one obviously has the thorns that you find on a thistle, and the other one doesn't tend to. It's a more bluey, purpley colour. So those 2 things become a key in the July-August timeframe. So that's the key time to control those.
So if growers don't get their herbicide sprays on at that time, are they going to? Will they experience a reasonable amount of yield drop?
They can do. So clover's a difficult crop to predict what's going to happen. And in terms of growing clover, a lot of it's more an art than a true science. So like we've had 2 trials over the last 2 years. So the first trial, we pretty much doubled yield from controlling south thistle, and last year there was no real requirement to control it. Other than you now probably on those crops are going to spend 7 years weeding the seed that was deposited from that crop. So if you can tell me what the weather's going to do in sort of November, December, we can say whether there's going to be a yield problem or not from not controlling the thistle. But often the control of that brings more beneficial, I guess, characteristics for the crop. So you can control bulk and actually be in charge of how the clover is going to progress through the season, as opposed to just being able to respond to what the environment does. So there's multiple benefits and issues with trying to control these thistles at this time of the year.
And the chemicals that we've got available are still performing well?
Yeah, no, definitely. The chemicals we have are performing well, and the options that growers would want to investigate depend really on how the crop sits. So the larger the crop and the more well established it is, that allows you to use the Jaguar 2,4-D. So that's bromoxynil, difefenacin and a 2,4-D mix to control south thistle, and that's still our best go-to product. So Jaguar has been removed from the marketplace and replaced by 2 other products which seem to work equally as well, which is a really nice thing for growers to have confidence in.
So same
in
active ingredient?
Same active ingredient, same ratio, just a different trade name and manufactured by a different manufacturer. But the good thing is they appear to work just as well as the original that everybody relied on for the last sort of 10 years. So if your crop's well established, you can do that. Otherwise, you have to start being creative. And so when I say that, you can't expect one herbicide application to control the weed. So if we're going to use Tropitox, which is a mixture of MCPA and MCPB, it's going to take 2 applications. And growers have to be aware that they will look at the thistle and think, oh yeah, it's died, but it'll actually regrow and shoot away when things start to warm up. So they have to go back and apply the same thing again, and they will get good control from doing that. So by doing that, you don't have the growth regulation of the clover. So if your crop's a bit backwards or been eaten, as a lot of them have this season, then you can start using some of those safer products. The other one that people should be aware of that they can use is paraquat, and paraquat is quite good at just holding the weed in the state it's in there. So burn the top off it, buy yourself a month, and then look at trying to control it afterwards when it regrows out. So it's an underrated product at the moment for that sow thistle control.
Okay. Now, obviously, sow thistle's not going to be the only weed that the growers have got to deal with. So what's the next cab off the rank that they've got to try and manage?
So the other things that keep coming up in our discussions are groundsel and beaked parsley. So beaked parsley, we don't really have any good control options for in clover, but paraquat again is quite useful. But you can expect it to regrow. And the groundsel one, generally for probably the last 5 to 7 years, people have been bringing it up all the time. So we had one trial last year looking at that, and the products I've already mentioned seem to be the best we've got. So paraquat treatment, quite good at finishing off groundsel, and the Jaguar 2,4-D mix again, the bromoxynil difefenacin mix with 2,4-D, again, those are the best things we've got. The problem we get into at this time of the year with groundsel is that we're actually dealing with a mature plant. Everything that's registered for groundsel control is only looking at maybe 4 leaves, but groundsel might only have 4 to 6 leaves at this time of the year, but it's actually got a flower, and that makes it a mature plant. A lot harder to kill. So we can burn it off and then look at controlling it later with the other products that I've mentioned.
So how many sort of herbicide applications would a normal management practice require?
A normal management of white clover, you're probably looking at 3 to 4, maybe 5 if you've got a specific problem. So sow thistle, if we can control it with 1 application, we're generally looking at something applied early in the establishment phase, and then we're looking at whether we've got hair grass, whether we've got a grass problem in the paddock, and you may or may not need a later application for something like field matter that causes dressing losses at the end of the season. So we might be looking at up to 4 applications of herbicide in a clover crop.
And there's a good herbicide resistance management component of that?
There is, because most of, like the curb, for example, we're actually using in these crops to control grasses that we may or may not be able to control in other parts of the rotation. So having clover in a predominantly grass rotation, which is generally where it's grown, is a really good anti-resistance strategy. And the one that keeps popping up is the diflufinicin, or what we call DFF, in a number of different crops, and we will use it in clover, we use it in wheat, and we use it in ryegrass. So that one does keep popping up as a potential issue.
Yeah.
But we do need to, one of the main principles of growing white clover is that we have some bare ground between the drill rows, and we won't get high seed yields if we don't have good weed control and control of that ground in between, or the competition in between the drill rows.
So would weed control be the number one sort of crop protection issue for white clover?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's how we build the foundation for the potential yield, is to control so the stolons need light, or they need sunlight when they grow out between the rows. If we don't get sunlight, we won't get vigorous flowering. So we need light down at the stolon level. If there's competition for that, we'll have reduced flowering and more leaf production. So outside of that, the pests that we've mentioned, there's not really any pathogens, fungal pathogens that they can be present in a damp season, but they don't tend to cause us problems. And we do get a few aphids and thrips at the end of the season over summer, and they may or may not require control.
So are any of the growers who are sort of growing white clover, are they looking at any non-chemical sort of weed control options, or are the chemicals really the base things that are going to sort of help them manage their crop?
At the moment, I'd say 90% are probably using chemicals to control their crop. You can use the residues from previous crops to help suppress weeds, but you need to be able to get the stolons to grow above the residue that you leave.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a trade-off. Some of the more modern cultivars that have probably been released in the last 10 years can handle a wee bit of shading. So you could get away with a little bit of residue from previous crops between rows and things like that with the modern cultivars. Hui is still the most widely grown cultivars, bred 30, 40 years ago. It doesn't have as the tolerance of shading like the more modern cultivars with the genetics that have been included. So it still needs bare ground between the drill rows. Well, it doesn't actually. It needs light to the stolon tips to allow the flowers to emerge. So if they get shaded, they tend to abort or be smaller than if they're emerging into the sunlight.
So are any of the chemicals that are currently being used, are any of them at risk of us losing them?
Plenty. So so we had the Jaguar thing, which was a commercial decision to be removed, but one of the components in there, bromoxynil, is potentially at risk, and we don't know how long that may stay. EPA have reviewed paraquat, and we've got paraquat for a few more years, but they did remove some preglone mixes from the market, which worries me that reglone, we may follow the Europeans and removal of it from the marketplace. And for any white clover grower trying to harvest without reglone, they'll know that that's going to be a big issue. So we've already started trying to investigate options for harvesting without reglone. So we use reglone to dry the crop out, try and remove a whole lot of moisture out of the crop at harvest so that we can actually thrash the seed out and separate it from the leaf material in the combine. So we've tried some fatty acids to desiccate the crop, and we've also tried windrowing and some of those things, and those things they'll have to become the mainstay if we lose reglone. The harvest will be really difficult, and I'm perhaps not old enough to remember or to know how we used to harvest white clover before reglone came on the market. It's always been there the whole time I've been through my career. So we might have to go back to cutting and leaving it lying on the ground for hopefully only 5 or 6 days, but who would know?
Do we know whether any of the chemical companies have got any products coming through their pipelines that that might be available?
There are still products that we can use. So we've also been using glyphosate, which is Buster, which does desiccate white clover quite nicely. Unfortunately, it pretty much kills the regrowth after harvest. So growers that like to fatten lambs and use the clover as a cover crop for their next crop, that's an issue. So we can effectively kill the clover off. I don't know of any. Well, there are a whole lot of I guess you could still call them desiccants that open the plant up. There are things out there. It's just a matter of making them work on clover. So the problem we've had with a lot of those is we can burn the top layer of leaf off, but then we can't get down underneath. Like Redlone's really good at getting down and drying out some of the lower levels of the canopy as well. So it might become that instead of one application, again, it becomes 3 or 4 applications to dry a crop down, which really starts to eat into the economics of how it's going to work. So whether we can do it economically will be the big question.
Okay, so if coming back to this moment in time, what's the top recommendations for growers to make sure they give themselves the best chance to get a good white clover seed crop?
So at the moment, we want to set things up for spring, and we don't know what the spring weather's going to bring. So we need to be trying to control these hard to kill weeds. So the sow thistles at the moment and any hawksbeards that are there, and also the grasses, the hard to kill grasses of Vulpia. So this is now talking get on top of those, try and get some bare ground between the drill rows. If the crop's really looking bulky and forward, then the applications, including the 2,4-D ester products, puts you back in control. So by holding back the growth, and that can put you back in charge for the next 2 or 3 months. If it does come dry, then people might actually need to be able to promote growth. So the use of that 2,4-D ester actually gives you the option of being able to enhance growth when you want to do it. So for now, we're just trying to separate or slow things down, really, if they're nice and well established.
Yeah. So any last comments for the growers around winter weed control?
I think the big thing is just to be prepared, be ready for when the weather allows you to do what you want to do. So have curb on hand, so you can look to apply it when it's needed. Apply the 2,4-D ester mixes when the weather's suitable in July or August. Don't do it once we start getting into mid to late September as temperatures warm up, because then we have the risk of it volatilising off and disappearing and damaging other areas. So that once you get through to mid-September, the use of that needs to be really, really, really careful and restricted. Yeah. So after that, we start running into back to the Tropotox mixes, and just keep an eye out for any spring germinating sow thistles. They are easy to kill when they're nice and small. So any of the products we've talked about will do the job when they're small. And if you've got a problem in the middle of winter, you'll probably have a problem come September, October timeframe of newly emerging weeds.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Richard. Lots of good advice for the growers.
No, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you very much, listeners, and have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.